Said today we had confirmation earlier this evening that the two synagogues have been in existence a combined 355 years, or is it 345? 1845 and 1850. So these two congregations came together and we're working hard on it. So I'm pleased to be here with you on this Erev Shavuot. We only have about 40 minutes or so, and we've got, that'll take us probably to verse 4. I'm going to rush and get us to 6. The Book of Ruth is a fascinating book. Let me just say a little bit about Shavuot. So you know the word Shavuot means weeks, and Shavuot is 7 weeks after Pesach. And the rabbis really worked with the Torah on this, but there are 3 pilgrimage festivals, as you know: Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot. Pesach and Sukkot are on the 15th day of a Hebrew month. And that makes sense because the Hebrew calendar is a lunar calendar. It's really a solar-adjusted lunar calendar, but for now all we need is lunar. The first day of the month, the moon is a sliver, and the last day of the month, it's gone back to a sliver. On the 15th, it's full moon. It makes a lot of sense to have your holidays on a full moon in a rural society, pre-industrial and so on. Shavuot, if it were a multiple of 30 days after Pesach, would be on the 60th day after Pesach. But it's on the 50th day after. So it alone among the 3 pilgrimage festivals is not on a full moon. One of the reasons for that is that we want to connect Pesach with Shavuot. And the rabbis work pretty hard to be sure that the Torah acknowledges that it's 50 days after Pesach. There's a famous article by the British philosopher Isaiah Berlin called Two Concepts of Liberty. Those 2 concepts are negative liberty and positive liberty. Negative liberty is freedom from bondage. Positive freedom is freedom to construct your life according to your own principles. What happened in negative liberty is the escape of the Israelites from Egypt and the crossing of the Red Sea. What Emil Fackenheim, the philosopher, calls the voice of God at the sea, the redeeming voice of God. Shavuot represents the opportunity to live the lives that we want to live. And that is featured by the deliverance of Torah, the Mount Sinai event, the commanding voice of God, so that we move here from negative liberty, which creates the opportunity, and Sinai, which gives us the wherewithal to develop our lives as we want to as a community. Shavuot celebrates, among other things, the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. And that's not surprising, therefore, that the Torah reading on the first day of Shavuot is Exodus chapters 19 and 20, the arrival of the Israelites at Sinai, and then chapter 20, the giving of the 10 Commandments, followed by chapters 21, 22, and 23, which elaborate on the commandments. Here's why I'm telling you this. First, because I think it's interesting inherently. But the Book of Ruth is the Megillah that we read on Shavuot. What does the Book of Ruth have to do with Mount Sinai? Apparently nothing. So we want to think about the Book of Ruth in terms of its being the appropriate accompaniment to the Mount Sinai revelation and the giving of the Torah, okay? Ruth is one of the 5 Megillot, the 5 scrolls. The 5 scrolls are arranged in the Tanakh in chronological order. Song of Songs accompanies Pesach. Ruth comes to Shavuot. Let's just give them English months, just for clarity. Pesach in April. Shavuot in June. Tisha B'Av in August, and there we read the Megillah of Lamentations. Sukkot in October, that's number 4 in the chronology, and Purim in March. The Megillot follow the Jewish calendar. We often say that the Bible creates the calendar. In this sense, the calendar creates the Bible. The order of biblical text follows the Jewish calendar. So what comes second has created what comes first. Or to put it, I think, more clearly, the rabbis have decided to impose a calendar structure on the 5 Megillot, which I think is very fascinating. So you have a sheet here. I hope it doesn't look too formidable. We will take a look at it as we begin to move through the Book of Ruth. So let's turn to page 418. And as we do when we study Tanakh, we say a blessing before the reading of it. Those who know the blessing, let's do it together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshana b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. We praise you, Lord, our God, sovereign of the universe, who sanctifies us through God's commandments, enjoining upon us the obligation, la'asok, to make Torah our business, to immerse ourselves in words of Torah. Not to draw doctrines from Torah, even though one could do that. Not in order to create one monolithic community. The community, according to this blessing, is gathered not around doctrine, but around Torah discussion. Make Torah your business. The rabbis say, and this blessing does clarify that and emphasize that really Torah should be our business all the time. Well, how unrealistic is that? We have other things to think about. So I make a distinction, it's a distinction really I find in Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik's writings, between overt and covert awareness. Overt awareness is what's at the top of my mind at a particular point. Right now, my overt awareness is discussing the Book of Ruth with you. That's what I'm thinking about right now. There are things I'm aware of, but not overtly. Until I started this part of the conversation, I was not thinking about my children. But my children are always on my mind, whether or not they're top of mind. And part of my orientation in life has to do with my love for and devotion to my children. La'asok b'divrei Torah is about covert awareness. Of course, we should overtly be thinking about Torah and studying Torah. What this prayer suggests, though, it should be the framework, even if it's not at the top of our consciousness, for the way in which we live our lives, parallel to the role of my children in my life. So the prayer isn't saying to us unrealistically, think about nothing but Torah, but try to get the values, the worldview, the aspirations as part of the deep structure of the way in which we live our lives. So let's turn to the Book of Ruth. So it's on page 418. Unfortunately, it does not have verse statements here. We don't know what the verses are. I don't see it either in the Hebrew or the English. Okay. In the day when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah with his wife and 2 sons went to reside in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech. His wife's name was Naomi, and his 2 sons were named Machlon and Chilion. Ephrathites of Bethlehem in Judah. Anybody know what the word Bethlehem means in Hebrew? House of bread. Okay. They came to the country of Moab and remained there. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. And they lived there about 10 years. Then those 2, Machlon and Chilion, also died. So the woman was left without her 2 sons and without her husband. Now, in the space of 4 verses, the author has packed in a lot of information. There's a famine. Ironically, the house of bread has no bread, okay? We can think of this literally, that they lived in Bethlehem. We can also think of it metaphorically. Bethlehem and its opposite represent plenty and scarcity, okay? In the space of a few verses, they come as a family, all the men die, and the 2 women, the two men have married Moabite women. The relationship between Moab and ancient Israel is checkered, but Moab was often seen as an enemy, okay? So we might say that Ruth and Orpah are from an enemy country. So here is Naomi, left without men, in the company of 2 women from the enemy of the Israelites, in the presence of famine. Notice, I mean, we have to admire the author here, who has packed in an enormous amount of information. They move from the house of bread to utter catastrophe in the space of 4 verses. What is going to befall Naomi? Let's go on. She started out with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab. For in the country of Moab, she had heard that Adonai had taken note of the people and given them food. The scarcity is now being reversed, and she has heard that, and she's going back home. Accompanied by her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living, and they set out on the road back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, "Turn back, each of you, to her mother's house. May Adonai grant each of you that you find security in the house of a husband." Notice how gracious Naomi is. She does not want to burden her daughters-in-law by accompanying her back to enemy territory. And what good would it do them anyway? They couldn't find husbands there. So she says to them, "Go home. Thank you very much for accompanying me, but go home. I care about your well-being." And she kissed them farewell. They broke into weeping, and they said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi replied, "Turn back, my daughters. Why should you go with me? Have I any more sons in my body who might be husbands for you?" Okay, so she surmises that one of their motivations in coming back is that they recognize the custom of levirate marriage. If a husband dies before siring a son, the brother of the husband now has an obligation to have sexual intercourse with the widow in order to raise up a son for his deceased brother, so that 2 things could happen: a regular transfer of the property of his brother, deceased brother, and so his name should not be blotted out in Israel, okay? And she surmises, she assumes this custom is now current, and she assumes that even though they're Moabites, they recognize the importance of this idea, and they're going to accompany her, okay? Levirate marriage, The author is laying the framework for what is to come in this story, and levirate marriage is going to loom large. Turn back, I'm now in paragraph 3 or 4. Turn back, my daughters, for I am too old to be married. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I were married tonight and I also bore sons, should you wait for them to grow up? I don't have children in my womb now. You might think that I'm pregnant and in a couple of months and then wait a couple of years and you can marry them. I'm not even married. So the hope, your hope, my sense that this may be your motive, it is of no avail in any sense whatsoever. Should you, I'm in the middle of the paragraph, on their account debar yourselves from marriage? Oh no, my daughters, my lot is far more bitter than yours. This is Job. Naomi here is Job, who has no thought of any felicitous future, and she complains bitterly. In a way, she's an intensification of Job. Oh no, my daughters, my lot is far more bitter than yours, for the hand of Adonai has struck out against me. They broke into weeping again. Let's pause here. At this point, Ruth and Orpah are parallel. They're doing each the same thing the other is doing. They're going back. Why? I don't know. They care about their mother-in-law. They want to accompany her. I imagine they can't abide in the idea that this woman from Bethlehem, from Israel, should be traveling alone in a foreign enemy company. So they are gracious toward her, each of them. This is laudable. Both of them are doing what is laudable. They broke into weeping again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law farewell. Naomi says, go back, surmising that there are reasons for this, which we've explored a little bit. And Orpah says, okay, I'm going back. But Ruth clung to her. I'm looking for this. I wish there were verse. Anybody see it? The root, Davkaba, where is that? Or Davkaba. Oh, here it is. It's, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines from the bottom. When you see that English off to the right, just before the end of it in the Hebrew. If you don't read Hebrew, don't worry about it. In Hebrew syntax, typically the verb comes first and then the noun. When the noun comes first, the author has something in mind. So when Joseph has his dreams, and he says to the brothers, I've had this dream that you're going to serve me. And Jacob rebukes Joseph, but it says, but Jacob kept the matter in his head, okay? It doesn't say the verb first, it says v'Yaakov, that he kept. So it's to be translated not Jacob kept the matter in mind, but as for Jacob, he kept the matter in mind. Here, Ruth, the word Ruth comes first. This is not just Ruth clung to her, it's as for Ruth, she didn't do what Orpah did. She clung to Naomi. Here's what I make of this. Orpah is a morally good person. This is not good versus bad. This is the laudable versus the extraordinary. In other words, the author does not need to elevate Ruth by means of debunking Orpah. The author is willing to say that in all conventional, customary terms, Orpah is a good person. Nobody has the obligation to be heroic. We have the obligation to be moral, but we don't have the obligation to put ourselves in mortal danger. And this is Orpah. But by contrast, the root, Davkaba, as for Ruth, she clung to her. So she said, see, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and her gods. Go follow your sister-in-law. But Ruth replied, do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus and more may Adonai do to me, if anything but death parts me from you. When Naomi saw how determined she was to go with her, she ceased to argue with her, and the two went on until they reached Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole city buzzed with excitement over them. The women said, can this be Naomi? Naomi means pleasant. Can this be pleasantness? Do not call me Naomi, she replied. Call me Mara. Mara from the same root as maror, the bitter herbs we eat at Passover. You shouldn't call me by a name that suggests that things are going well for me. Call me by the name that really describes my situation, the Job again. Call me Mara, for Shaddai has made my lot very bitter. I went away full, and Adonai has brought me back empty. How are we to take that statement? How do you understand that statement? It certainly represents Naomi's point of view and her emotional valence at this point. Is it true? No, why? She has Ruth. Remember that the whole context of chapter 1 in this story is the move from plenty to famine. They hear that there is bread in Bethlehem. One of the elements of Shavuot is the celebration of the first harvest. Harvest. Plenty. What's happening here? The return to plenty is happening on two levels. This is what I mean by saying that the Bethlehem idea may refer to a city, but it also refers to the structure of the context of this story. She says, I came back empty. The author here is being ironic. The author is letting us in on the truth. What is irony? Saying one thing and meaning another. It's storming outside, and I call my brother in St. Louis, and I say to him, we're having a beautiful day here. I don't mean that literally. I'm being sarcastic. I'm saying one thing and meaning another. The author here is representing Naomi's view, not the truth which is dawning on the reader as we read it. There is a story unfolding here about which Naomi has no inclination or understanding whatsoever. But the author is lit to the attentive reader. We see that the author is letting us in on a larger duality, from famine to plenty. Naomi is not coming back with nothing.
But if Naomi understands and recognizes levirate marriage, and she says to Ruth, I cannot give you levirate marriage, then she does have nothing.
Then she does have
Nothing.
Well, look, I mean, it's going to take a plot development to begin to bring up over the horizon the possibility of levirate marriage. It's not going to be Naomi. It's going to be Boaz. Those of us who know the story know this. But how that happens is going to be very, very fascinating as they work together. By the way, where do we learn about, so levirate marriage well, I just said what it was. And Boaz is the second nearest relative who says to her, I know we're not going to get there, who says to her, I'm going to do this for you, not in so many words, but there's somebody first in line. And fortunately, or is it fortunately, the first in line demurs and gets out of the way. Levirate marriage happens. They have a child. Who is this child? Oved. Who is Oved? The great-grandfather of David. The last word of the book of Ruth is David. In some sense, this is David's story. Or to put it differently, before this story took place, what were the chances that King David would be born? Zero. David, the second greatest individual in the Bible, aside from Moses. And at the bottom of this sheet, you can see I have here the genealogy of Ruth. And in order to get that genealogy, we have to go back to the Genesis story of Judah and Tamar and the Genesis story of the daughters of Lot, both of which, as improbable as each of those stories are, those stories also might never have happened. The prospect of getting King David is near zero. Or to put it differently, the advent of David and the rise of David is a miracle. I can use a miracle literally, I can use it figuratively. I got up the morning and jumped out of bed and I got right to work within 5 minutes. What a miracle. I don't mean that literally. A miracle, conventionally understood, is something that comes from God. Anything come from God yet in this story? I'm sorry? That's Naomi's view, yeah. The crisis, tragedy. It happens in life. There's famine. There are enemies. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. You set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. The 23rd Psalm, which is an extremely hopeful poem, I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever, does not shy away from catastrophe. And it says, God is not going to get rid of these things for us. We live in the valley of the shadow of death. We live in the shadow of death in two ways. The fear of death and the reality of death. Both are part of the shadow of death. I'm hoping I'm 20 years away from death, but still I'm a little anxious about it. That's one idea. God is not going to solve that problem according to the Psalm. So what happens in this story is a variety of wonderful things, but they don't obviate the reality of the problems of life. There's famine. In God's goods world, there's deprivation and tragedy. What about levirate marriage? Does that have something to do with God? It's in the Torah. It's a law that comes, just to put it this way, since this is Shavuot, from Sinai. Has God been an actor in this story yet? Well, we might say yes. There was famine and there was the end of famine. But we don't have God entering the story yet as an actor. God does enter as an actor very, very late in the story when he allows Ruth to become pregnant. Yeah, you like that, yeah. But what we're dealing with here is the use of the values of Torah in an entirely this worldly context, okay? And we have to see more of that. So here we are the second paragraph on page 419. Thus Naomi returned from the country of Moab. She returned with her daughter-in-law, Ruth the Moabite. They arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. Yes, good timing. This is both literal and figurative. The famine is over on a deeper level when Ruth arrives with Naomi. Now Naomi, chapter 2, had a kinsman on her husband's side, a man of substance of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Ruth the Moabite, by the way, if we go back to the page before, when she says in the last paragraph, don't urge me to leave you, to turn back, and so on. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. At this moment, she becomes part of Naomi's people. It does not feature a ritual of conversion. There's no ritual of conversion here. One joins a people voluntarily to embrace a people's customs and ceremonies and to take their high God as her high God. So, for all intents and purposes, without the author having to say so, the author is very much like Mozart. What frustrates me about Mozart is he does something extraordinary and he goes on. He doesn't repeat it. Do it again. Be more explicit. Mozart trusts his listeners. I've said it. I've got more to say. If you get it, great. I'm not going to pound it into your head. The author here doesn't pound it into our heads. Ruth has become an Israelite. So when we look at chapter 2, but now Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a man of substance of the family, whose name was Boaz. Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, wait a minute now. Why is the author continuing to call her a Moabite? Well, it hasn't been made explicit, but in conventional terms, she is still a Moabite. She's seen as a foreigner. What has happened internally. And for the attentive reader who sees that she has embraced and therefore become a part of Naomi's people, we know the irony here. The author is calling her a Moabite when under the surface, we, the reader, know that's not true. But it is true in terms of the structure of society, who still might see her as a foreigner. In other words, one of the things about irony is you can say two things at once, and two things that are in contradiction. She's a Moabite and she's not a Moabite, A and not A. The whole world of the universe is divided into A and not A. Everything is either a flower or it's not a flower. Okay? So this is this.
It's the people who are speaking about Ruth as Ruth the Moabite.
Well, not necessarily here.
So they don't know that she converted.
Absolutely, but we know. But what the author is saying here is there are two viewpoints here. There's the viewpoint of the society, and that's being reflected here. But also there's a viewpoint of the transformation that has taken place. And we're going to see her operate as an Israelite. Let's go back. So Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, I'd like to go to the fields and glean among the ears of grain behind someone who may show me kindness. Okay? Two things to notice here. The word kindness, chesed, loving kindness, love, and so on, enters the picture. Also, where the heck does this idea of going into the fields and gleaning among the ears of grain come from? That's a strange idea. Where does it come from? Where is it? It's not tzedakah per se. It's got a particular origin. It's in Leviticus chapter 19, where we're not allowed to do two things. when we own a field and we begin to reap it, we're not allowed to reap everything at the outset. We're to not go all the way to the corners. So we're to leave something that's before I've harvested. While I'm harvesting, I also have to, as I'm picking up the grain, I have to leave what I've dropped behind. Okay? So there are two ways in which I'm obligated to leave something for the poor. That's Torah. There's a presumption here of a life of Torah without harping on what Shavuot is all about. And that is, the Torah comes from Mount Sinai, from the voice of God. This is not a theologically oriented story. It's a story of the lived life. The life of this community is a life of fidelity to Torah. It doesn't say, if you do the right thing, I will give you the rain in the season, the early rain and the latter rain. The voice of God, the commanding voice of God, is not present in this story. What is present is the embrace of Torah true living by the people. They don't say here because God said. Or, let me quote Leviticus 19. As a matter of fact, they just say, back to the second line of chapter 2, Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, I'd like to go to the fields and glean among the ears of grain behind someone who may show me kindness. Yes, daughter, go, she replied, and off she went. She came and gleaned in a field behind the reapers, and as luck would have it, there's a lot behind this notion of as luck would have it. Luck strikes us as something that doesn't have a theistic or a religious connotation. The word here really means something like, as it happens. We can't predict it, but all of a sudden this happens. As luck would have it, but what it means is, she goes out into the fields, and what she runs into is just what she needs. The society is working on its own in the manifesting Torah true living. Let's go on.
Excuse me.
5 minutes.
Can't you say it was Bashert?
What does Bashert mean? Good. But Bashert might mean blind luck. It was just destined. But this is a destiny that has its origin without the story pounding away at it. It's the bashert of living a life of fidelity to certain values. Preeminently chesed, loving kindness, love. And we can see that part of the effect of love, part of the offshoot of love, are the laws of Torah, which lead to a felicitous, purposeful life. Okay? So that it's not bashert in the sense that it's out of the blue. It's bashert in the sense that the backdrop here is that people like Ruth have embraced Judaism and its values. Let's go on. As luck would have it, it was the place of land belonging to Boaz. Yeah, luck. You remember way back in Genesis 24, when Abraham sends his senior servant, maybe Eliezer, but he's not named Eliezer in this story. He's named it in chapter 15. To go get a wife for his son Isaac. And along the way, this servant prays to God, please make it apparent to me. As luck would have it, as soon as he says that, here comes Rebecca. Blind luck or the subtle hand of God. That is not, so we're being asked in this story to deal with each other with loving kindness. But if you want to look beyond the horizontal, we with one another, to the vertical, without pounding the theological motif, these people have already received the goodness and love from God, which gives them the life that they've embraced and makes their life felicitous. Okay? Let's go on just a little bit. This what would have it. It was a piece of land belonging to Boaz, who was of Elimelech's family. I mean, Boaz is the right guy now. Even though in Deuteronomy, the levirate thing is codified in Deuteronomy chapter 25, it's going to have to be a brother. The idea that it could be something beyond the brother seems to come from another custom, which this story emulates, because it's not a literal reading of the demand of Deuteronomy 25. What I'm just pointing out here is there are different ways of understanding levirate marriage. Narrow, full in the Torah. Don't forget when Tamar, Judah and Tamar, and her first two husbands die, and Judah says, I'm not giving another son to her. And she conspires to have him do the insemination. He's not a brother. So that comes from a different tradition. All right, let's just go on a second or two. Presently, Boaz arrived in Bethlehem. By the way, the word in Hebrew for presently is hine. Hine means here, but it also means wow. Oh my gosh, wait a minute. Something wondrous has happened. Boaz is, wow, the right guy at the right time. He greets the reapers. May Adonai be with you. These are his workers. And he's treating them with kindness. This is a life of Torah. And they responded, may Adonai bless you. I mean, can we imagine an owner of a vast factory, maybe this isn't fair, going around every morning and just saying, may God be with you, and they say to him, may God be with you. Of course it can happen. Anybody can be kind, but it's less likely. This is a life of consideration and concern for one another. Boaz said to the servant who was in charge of the reapers, whose girl is that? And the servant in charge of the reapers replied, she's a Moabite girl, there's that irony again, who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. I mean, it's not irony from the point of view of the one who says it, but we, the reader, are constantly alerted to, wait a minute, there's a deeper reality here. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves beyond the reapers. She's been on her feet ever since this morning. She has rested a little bit in the hut. Here's this nobody they think of as a Moabite from the enemy territory, and she's penurious, and she has no wherewithal, and she's out in the field, and yet they're deeply concerned about her well-being. She hasn't taken a rest. She hasn't had enough to drink. And she said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves. She's been on her feet ever since this morning. She's rested but little in the hut. Boaz says to Ruth, listen to me, daughter. Don't go glean in another field. Don't go elsewhere, but stay here close to my girls. Keep your eyes on the field they are reaping and follow them. I've ordered the men not to molest you, and when you're thirsty, in parentheses, on your own, when you're thirsty, don't wait for the bell to ring. It's time for a break. Go to the jars and drink some of the water that the men have drawn. She prostrated herself with her face to the ground and said to him, why are you so kind as to single me out? And Boaz said, I've been told of all that you did for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and the land of your birth and came to a people not known before. May Adonai reward your deeds. May you have full recompense from Adonai, God of Israel, under whose wings you have sought refuge. Okay? You have sought refuge under the wings of God. Now, if we had enough time, And we only have 15 minutes left. No, I'm kidding, I know. I almost had you there.
Cantor's looking.
She will eventually come under Boaz's wings. The same word will be used, or to put it this way. When we come under the domain of kindness by one human being to another, we are simultaneously coming under the wings of God's kindness. Human kindness is living out the kindness of God. Okay? So it's not accidental that wings is used in two places here. You're going to come under the wings of God. And then she says, let me come under your wings. In other words, Ruth is initiating, not entirely, Naomi sent her out, but she is going to manage the drama through which Boaz has intercourse with her and she becomes pregnant. Ruth has undertaken the mitzvah of levirate marriage without its ever being said, because what this is concerned with is how people live their lives, not whether they are faithful overtly to a particular verticality, as I might put it this way. What are we going to do here? We have to stop mid-story. Is this fair? Is life fair? Here, let me put it this way. As unluck would have it, we have to stop. Chag Sameach. Thank you for being here. We didn't get to this sheet. Take a look at it.